when those means were not exhausted. The Chinese delegation had asked specific questions that failed to be answered, and therefore it had serious difficulty with the resolution. It had not blocked the passage of the resolution, however, because it attached great importance to the requests of the Arab League and the African Union. At the meantime, he supported the efforts of the United Nations Secretary General's envoy to resolve the situation by peaceful means.
Thank you very much, Ruiyao, and that ends our roundup for this week. Hope you enjoyed it and find it informative.
Hey, sir. We were just talking before we came on the air, and you were telling me about a very interesting phrase for a very interesting expression to describe Tibet.
Yeah, have you heard the roof of the world?
I've never heard it before.
You never heard? I think everybody knows it.
Well, it's always the first time.
The Tibet Autonomous Region is located in the southwest part of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau. It borders on Sichuan and Yunnan provinces to the east, Qinghai and Xinjiang to the north, and shares border with India, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and Burma to the south, and bounded by Kashmir to the west. The region covers more than 1.2 million square kilometers, accounting for 1/8 of China's total landmass, and ranking second in China.
Yeah, I don't think most people outside of China realize just how big Tibet is, especially considering the insignificant number of population in it compared to other regions in China.
Yeah.
So, what's the Chinese name for Tibet? Xizang?
Xizang.
Xizang.
Xi just means west.
Yeah. So you're talking about an area that's made up of a lot of high and steep mountains, deep valleys, glaciers, and even deserts, right? But the big thing about Tibet is that it all lies at an extremely high altitude. So you're talking mostly over 4,000 meters.
Yeah. So traveling there, be careful of the altitude sickness.
Yeah, I think that actually stops a lot of Chinese from traveling to the area, right?
Yeah.
And it's divided into roughly kind of 4 areas. So you got the North Tibet Plateau, the South Tibet Valley, the East Tibet Mountains and Valleys, and the Himalaya Mountains. What's it like, the weather? Is it warm or hot or cold? What are we looking at?
I think it's very cold, and it is bitterly cold in winter, with a marked difference in temperature between daytime and night. It features little rain and a sharp contrast between the dry and wet seasons. It is dry in winter and spring, with frequent occurrence of strong winds as well as low oxygen content. Tibet is so sunny as to have an annual sunshine of between 1,500 and 3,400 hours. It has a short frost-free period, usually ranging from 120 to 140 days a year.
So pretty short frost-free period, all right. And just like I was saying earlier, the population of Tibet is only 2.6 million or so. So compare that to the overall population of 1.4 billion-ish in China. You're looking at quite a low population density. Most of them are Tibetans, and apart from Tibetans, we have a couple of other minorities, the ethnic minorities such as Han, Hui, Monba, and Ndeten.
Yeah.
So since it's so high, that's why we call it the roof of the world, right?
Yeah, that's right. And Tibet, averaging more than 4,000 meters above sea level, forms the main part of the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, and is well known as the roof of the world, as I mentioned before. And the Himalayas, ranging from east to west on the southern edge of the Tibet Plateau, run for 2,400 kilometers and over more than 6,000 meters.
I think, yeah. So I think we should probably just not give the listeners too many figures on the mountains and stuff. But
okay.
Let's maybe talk about a few places we should probably visit if we go to Tibet. What do you think would be the place that you must make sure you go see if you go to Tibet? So.
I think the Potala Palace.
Well, can you explain a bit to me? I've never actually been to Tibet, so I wouldn't know. What's it like? It
is a world-famous palace castle-like architectural complex. Is at the center of Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. On top of the Hongshan mountain, and the Budala is a sound transliteration of ancient Indian Sanskrit.
Sanskrit, right? Yeah.
Sanskrit, meaning of the holy land of Buddhism. It is a sacred and solemn place in Tibetans' eyes.
Right, so it's the highest elevation of palaces, castles, and temples, right, integrated into one building.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
I mean, in 641 AD, it was Sonsun Gampo, so Tulbo king of Zhang nationality, and he was in charge. He married the princess Wencheng of the Tang dynasty, who believed in Buddhism. So he built this new place on Hongshan Mountain for this princess Wencheng. And this is the modern day Potala Palace, right?
That's right.
So it's only kind of reached this scale after reconstruction in the 1600s and the extension by Dalai number 13. So what can you tell me maybe a little bit about Tibetan food? Is it easily compared to the rest of Chinese cuisine, or
I think it's very different.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, Tibetan food just shows a major influence of the Indian and Chinese methods of cooking, but the ingredients that are used are mainly of the mountain areas. Like the food that one gets here is deliciously different and known for its exotic flavor. Well, that is good enough reason for you to try out Tibetan food, which for sure is going to be a new experience for your taste bud.
I did hear of one thing from Tibet which was absolutely a must try, according to a friend of mine in China, and he said that the salted butter tea. So they use boiled tea and they pour it into a long churn with salt and yak butter, right? They churn it up and it kind of mixes up and ready to be served. And then there are lots of tea shops in Lhasa which serve this kind of sweet milk tea, and the Tibetan people really like this. Is this true?
Yeah, and I really want to try this.
And I think another thing which our listeners might be a little more familiar with is the Tibetan barley beer called Chang. And you can get this, it's actually exported to kind of all around the world. I've had it in Dublin before anyway. And it's not as strong as some of the Chinese beers, and it's definitely worth trying if you want something different.
I think so.
But I do remember that the language in Tibet is it's tricky, right?
Yeah, the main language of the Tibet is Tibetan, which comes in many varying dialects. But many Tibetans speak or understand some Mandarin, except very rural tribes in the Far East Tibet. Tibetan is closely related to Burmese and much more distantly to Chinese. Depending on the dialect of Tibetan spoken, it may be tonal or non-tonal.
Right, and when you say they understand some Mandarin, so I guess in the cities the people all speak Chinese fluently, I'm sure. That's been told to me, but in the villages it might not be understood at all, is what they're saying. So most Han Chinese people wouldn't know any Tibetan if they're going to visit Tibet, right?
Yeah.
I know all the street signs are in at least bilingual, so Chinese and Tibetan. So, don't worry too much if you're going there and you're worried about the language. There is something though that you have to be quite careful about, and that is that tourism to Tibet is quite strictly controlled by the Chinese government. So it's important that when you're traveling to Tibet, that you might have to be prepared for a lot of paperwork and one or two other hassles. It's also one of the few places where travellers have been reported to have been stopped by Chinese police or questioned as to where they're going, which actually happened to me on a train from Beijing to Xi'an. But normally the police officers are just kind of interested in where you're going, just want to talk to you, maybe not used to seeing foreigners that far out from the major cities, so it's nothing to be worried about. Any advice on visas or entrance permits to Tibet?
Well, I think that all foreigner visitors to Tibet need one or more permits.
Yeah, that's right.
The basic one is a Tibet Tourism Bureau permit, which can be issued to you by Chinese travel agencies that handle trips to Tibet, or by the Chinese embassy on the proof of purchasing or a package tour.
Yeah, there's no way around that. I think you have to sometimes actually purchase a package tour to get this permit. And what about the aliens travel permit, the ATP?
The ATP, some parts of Tibet require it, which is issued by the Public Security Bureau in major Tibetan cities like Lhasa and Ali. The list of regions that require ATPs changes constantly, so inquire locally. If your papers are in order, the permits can be issued in several hours for
100 kwai, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting, it's not too expensive, but you just have to make sure that you are well prepared in advance. So a lot of the questions that we get asked involve around religion and stuff, and religion does it play an important role in defining Tibetan culture. And I think well, firstly, the culture of every country is hugely driven by the religion, and it's no different in Tibet either. The impact of Buddhism, which is the most widely practiced religion there, can be seen in almost kind of every place that you set your eyes on. So the keychains that you buy from the smallest of the street shops have some kind of depiction of Buddhism on them in some shape or form, right?
Yeah, and people of the Tibet take their religion, beliefs, and values very seriously. In the past, every family was expected to send at least one boy to monastery, which were religious, central impacting education. And even though the economic stability of Tibetans has increased manifold, but still many people go to these monasteries for their studies.
Yeah, and there's quite a richness and depth of traditions in Tibet, and it's kind of rooted in its cultural heritage. So they, you kind of notice that they have quite a wisdom and knowledge about life, and a tolerance and peace of mind. So like in Tibet, there's this simplicity of life, a kind of a spirituality of minds, and this all gives it a kind of strong hold to the Alpine region, and it kind of comes packaged with this holy charisma. I think definitely people should plan to go to Tibet if they're going to be in China. It's quite a magical experience, and I can't wait to go back and actually finally go there and check it out.
Me too. But there are also some tips we need to for our listeners.
Right, yeah, we just have a few tips here, I guess. So you should note that when you go to Tibet, you'll most likely find everyone there to be quite friendly, and maybe if you have one or two small words in the local Tibetan dialect, you should try use them when you're communicating with Tibetans. The further you travel from Lhasa, the more Tibetan is going to be used. So.
Yeah, and secondly, the religion is extremely important to the majority of Tibetans, and travelers should try to respect their customs and beliefs.
Religion is extremely important to the majority of Tibetans, and you should always kind of respect their customs and beliefs. So always walk around Tibetan Buddhist religious sites or monasteries in a clockwise direction, and when you're in a monastery, don't wear a hat, smoke, or touch any of the frescoes. You should avoid climbing onto statues. It's all very common sense, and just make sure that you keep you adhere to these kind of simple rules.
Yeah, and also supporting the Tibetan economy by purchasing from Tibetans is a great way to show help. Pay a fair price when bargain well, that some vendors may try to swindle tourists by selling at very high prices.
Yeah, I mean, if the prices are ridiculous, then but you shouldn't try and bargain them to too low a level. It's important that you leave some money in the local economy when you go visit. What else?
Like the help to keep Tibetan culture alive. It is very important to use Tibetan resources such as hotels, restaurants, guides, and souvenir stores, as the Tibetan culture is gradually being eroded.
And this will also help benefit the Tibetans financially in some measure, and in that way we can help ensure that the culture continues well into the future. Alright, thanks very much, guys. That's all we got about Tibet today, so that's all from myself and Sil.
Hope our listeners enjoying this.
Okay, guys, talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
却不让你想入非非，就让我们虚伪，有感情别浪费，不能相爱的一对，情爱像两兄妹，爱让我们虚伪，我得到于事无补的安慰，你也得到模仿爱上一个人的机会。